Hi, my name is Danielle, and I chose to do my project on emotional disturbances. Emotional disturbances can be a number of different things. There are a lot of different disorders when it comes to having emotional disturbance disorder, but they're all characterized and defined by this definition. An inability to learn that can't be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. An inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. Inappropriate types of behaviors or feelings under normal circumstances. A general pervasive mood of unhappiness or a tendency to develop physical symptoms or fears associated with personal or school problems. It's a really, really broad definition, and it's because there are so many different kinds of disorders, and everybody is so different. And since everybody is so different, it's not so as specific as something like an intellectual disorder. They can be caused by a lot of different things. It can be caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain, a really poor diet, extreme stress, or even how a family functions. Those are the main causes of an emotional disturbance. Of course, there can be other things, but those are pretty much the main things you can point out when you diagnose an emotional disturbance. Usually people think of an emotional disturbance as something like anxiety, depression, bipolar, and schizophrenia. Those are the go-to thoughts for someone with an emotional disturbance. But it can be something like an eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or a psychotic disorder that causes delusions and hallucinations. They're very, very different. Any of these disorders have really, really specific characteristics that a parent or teacher could recognize for sure. But there are a couple of different things that tie them all together that even if it's someone with a delusional disorder and someone with bulimia, you could see a few different traits in both of them, even though their disorders are so different. So the first thing that you would notice in someone with an emotional disturbance is withdrawal. They're not going to want to be especially if they're in the heat of the disturbance, if they're in something that's caused them to have a breakout of that disturbance, they'll be withdrawn. They won't want to be by other people. Especially a student who's in a classroom, they're going to be really withdrawn from their peers. Or even a family member or family members that the sister or the brother, they probably wouldn't want to be by their family members because they're feeling so bad inside. So withdrawal is one, and another one is a constant state of uneasiness or just being panicky, because for someone with bipolar or someone with schizophrenia, especially schizophrenia, they think that something bad is going to happen to them, and they are on a constant state of defense, and they are very uneasy people, and you could recognize that in anybody with an emotional disturbance. So there are a few different ways for a teacher and a parent to recognize these things, and what's the best thing for a parent or teacher to interact with the child with the emotional disturbance. But I think that it will start when the parent and the teacher work together for the child with the emotional disturbance. Having open communication between the two would be key for this student, and it would be in their best interest to make sure that the communication is constant between the two. So that means that if something is happening at school, whether it be extreme withdrawal, a constant state of panic, or anything unusual, I would expect a teacher to communicate that with the parent, just so that the parent is aware of what's going on and they're seeing how they're interacting with their peers at school, because I'm sure they would probably act different at home than they do at school. And the same thing goes for the teacher. They're going to want to know what's going on at home to help them connect the dots at school. So a parent and a teacher relationship is key to helping and recognizing different things in a student with emotional disturbance. Another thing for teachers would be to form a bond, an appropriate bond with the student that's affected. Because when you form a bond, then there's going to be trust there. And a student with an emotional disturbance probably doesn't like to talk about what's going on in their life. They want to hide it because they want to be normal, and they would definitely not confide in a teacher if there is no trust there. So making sure that you're checking in, even if it's just a, hey, how are you doing today kind of thing, that would form a bond, and then the student would be more apt to confide in a teacher if something is going on, or asking for help in something that they normally wouldn't. Also, for the teacher, knowing what sets the student off, what their tics are in the classroom, would be key to helping the student grow and recognizing how they can succeed. If they know their tics, then they would avoid them, and then the student would be more apt to succeed. So if, for example, if a student with anxiety if the anxiety is stronger than most, if the teacher can tell that they are nervous, as a teacher, I would try my best not to call on them all the time. Obviously, you want to treat every child the same, but if the student really doesn't like being called on because it puts them on the spot and it makes them really nervous, if the teacher is aware of that, they won't do it, and the student would be okay, and it wouldn't set them off into anything terrible like a panic attack. So that's for the parents, or for the teachers. But even though I'm not a parent, I don't have a child with an emotional disturbance, I think the best thing as a parent would to be making sure that you're showing that child love and acceptance, and even despite their disorder, they're still a part of their family, and they're still loved and cared for. And that would probably be the best foundation for a student and family member with an emotional disturbance to have to grow and succeed. And I think that would be the best kind of help that they could receive. But another obvious way to help a student and family member with an emotional disturbance is to seek out medical attention. As for pills and medication, I've seen what it looks like for an adult to take something for anxiety and depression, and it is not always pretty what those side effects do to an adult, and I can only imagine what they could do to a child. So that wouldn't be my first thing to do. Obviously, if it's necessary, there are some things that you just can't handle, and you have to do it. But if I were to seek out medical attention, it would be to seek out a psychiatrist, seek out counseling for the parents, the other family members, and of course, the child with the emotional disturbance, so that there is an outside perspective, someone who doesn't see what's going on all the time, to help grow the family and heal them in any way that they can. So, that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and Merry Christmas!